In Privacy Watch, Atlanta is in recovery mode following one of the worst cyber attacks ever against a U.S. city that crippled the state's capital's online network for 5 days until this Tuesday, when city workers were told that they could finally turn their computers back on.
Last Thursday, the city of Atlanta was attacked by hackers, and they demanded ransom money, blocking online access to certain city sites and leaving residents unable to pay bills, report potholes, or even use the Wi-Fi at the airport.
We have completed the investigation and containment phases of this incident response engagement based on our assessment of the threat, risks, and impacts. We are transitioning to the recovery phase.
One New York Times article entitled "A Cyber Attack Hobbles Atlanta," and security expert Shutter calls this incident one of the most sustained and consequential cyber attacks ever mounted against a major American city.
With details on the city's recovery, New York Times reporter Alan Blinder is in Atlanta. So, Alan, the city of Atlanta's employees just got their computer access back on Tuesday. How are they recovering?
It's a slow process in Atlanta. They've seen some services come back online here, but for a lot of the city, that's still somewhat paralyzed. You still can't pay your water bill online or even in person. They're still resetting court dates in municipal court. It's just a slow process of recovery here.
What was the reaction from people who worked for the city initially and subsequent to the attack when they realized that this was happening?
You know, I think there was a fair amount of surprise, some frustration, and I think there was some fear as well. I think in the wake of breaches like we've seen at Equifax and other major privacy breaches, there was a concern that maybe their personal data had gotten out of this. But the city's been telling employees and telling the public that they don't believe any personal data was compromised here. And that's helped buy some time, if you will, and buy some patience, even if there have been a lot of inconveniences so far.
I know if I lived in Atlanta, I would want to know, what are they doing to make sure that something like this doesn't happen in the future? Have you heard from officials?
Sure. The city has been talking about how they've brought in an outside security firm to help try to patch some holes to shore up the city's digital defenses, but they also haven't said much about how this happened and really gone into detail about what occurred. All they've said is it was a ransomware attack that started before dawn last Thursday. They said that they were looking at a variety of options to neutralize the threat. They said they had managed to neutralize and isolate it. But in terms of what this means going forward, all we've heard so far are just broad commitments to improving cybersecurity in the city.
So this hack has been linked to a group called the SamSam Hacking Crew. If the city can identify who did the hacking, why can't anyone track the group down?
I think the hard part of tracking down a group like SamSam is that they're paid in Bitcoins, so you can't trace these transactions. And from what we understand, it's been very hard to even know where these hackers are based. There are some signs that they are not based in the United States, but there's no conclusive proof of that. They operate in a very shadowy world where they send these ransomware attacks out, they engage, and then they disappear with their money or with the files still encrypted.
So you mentioned these groups are typically paid with some sort of cryptocurrency or something like that. In your article, the mayor would not say whether or not the city of Atlanta paid any money to them. Since that article was published, have you heard any more about that?
We asked again yesterday, we'll be asking again today, but so far the city has remained absolutely silent about what it was going to do. There are some cities around the country that have paid ransoms, not necessarily to SamSam, but to other ransomware organizations. And for instance, there was one recently in a suburb of Birmingham, Alabama, that paid up. But Atlanta has not indicated what it wants to do. Its ransom was about $50,000.
So I guess, Alan, is this the new future? I mean, do you think that cyber attacks on cities are going to become the new norm?
Virtually every expert we've talked with has said this is probably a reality of modern life. We've seen some surveys from chief information officers from governments around the country, and they've said that they receive attacks very often. I mean, there was something like a quarter of the country's local governments say that there's an attempted attack on their systems at least once an hour. So it's not going away.
That is terrifying.
It is indeed. Alan Blinder, thank you so much for your reporting. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.